Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming to Off the Record, hosted by CPI. My name is Jake Shabowski here on the government relations team. Very excited to introduce our special guest tonight, Mr. Ed Calderon. Ed is a counter-narcotics professional with a background also in organized crime investigations and public safety operations along the United States-Mexico border. He's also done executive protection details for foreign dignitaries and security trainings for people all across the globe. He's a wealth of information on immigration, illegal immigration, border policy, illicit drug trade, the whole shebang. So let's give it up one more time for Mr. Ed Calderon. Thank you. Also with us tonight is Phil Raboli, our Senior Director of Government Relations, to help facilitate the conversation. So without further ado, I'll hand it off to you guys.
All right. Thanks very much. Before we really get into it, that was a great intro. Ed, do you want to tell the audience who you are, what you do?
Sure. I was born and raised in Tijuana, Mexico. Most of you only saw it on The Simpsons in one episode, but it's an actual place, a mythical place. I found somebody else here from the mythical place of Tijuana. It's not all parties and nightlife. It's actually a pretty amazing place to grow up. It's close to San Diego. It's very Americanized. That's how I get my English. I grew up with three channels on TV. One of them Mexican, the other one Fox, and the other one a movie channel. So I got Americanized pretty early on. Catholic raised, very conservative family. Family nucleus, family was everything. I grew up around that. And at some point during my teenage years, the cartel issue started kind of popping its head up and pulling some of my friends into it. I was in the university studying medicine for my second year when 9/11 happened. 9/11 basically turned the economy down there. We went into a pretty bad recession. So I couldn't afford to be in medical school anymore. And I saw an ad in the newspaper for unmarried, childless individuals who had some sort of career path that wanted to join this experimental police force, a paramilitary institution. And I thought that was going to be a good idea for me. I joined at 21. This is 2004. 2 years before the drug war officially kicked off. Mexico was basically preparing for what was coming. What I thought was going to be a conventional police academy was actually a paramilitary academy. So my instructors were all members of a special forces unit in the Mexican military. A lot of those same members that trained me were the ones that turned into the Zetas later on. So we were being trained to fight cartel and criminal organizations and basically do counter narcotics operations in a very militaristic way. It was they saw that the need for, upping the game as far as going after them was there. So like I was one of the first generations of police officers in Mexico that had to carry around assault rifles, like full auto assault rifles. I was one of the first ones that did that. Grenade launchers, up armored vehicles. A lot of these firsts I got to see. I got to see some of the first cartel drones. I got to see the evolution of cartels into these underground nefarious groups, into overt military, almost quasi-government groups in certain regions of Mexico. And I got to live about 12 years of that lifestyle. A big part of the institution that I was in was an attempt to Americanize police forces. So I actually went through an American police certification called CALIA because they wanted to keep us honest. FBI background checks, polygraph examinations, they did everything to try and keep us on the up and up. But like all things in Mexico, there's a case of amnesia every presidential cycle. And we took Tijuana from the most dangerous cities list on the planet into not even appearing in it with the work we did. And the reward I got for it at the end was an investigation for human rights violation and an offer to work for one of the cartels by the new director of police. And I had to resign. luckily, during my career, I developed some close relationships with some of the people that trained me, including some of the people from the Naval Special Warfare community, who were very instrumental in professionalizing and showing us how to do our jobs. So a man by the name of Dan Stanchfield and his beautiful wife, Kelly, hosted my family as I was fleeing Mexico. And I wasn't running from the cartels. I was running from some of the people that took charge of the group that I was in. And I made this country my home after that. I have a 10-year-old who's a fourth generation American. I have a very weird background and skill set that has made me be sought after by certain police institutions, government organizations, and just at-risk communities out there, from Native women who are afraid of being abducted and trafficked to drug interdiction units wanting to know what certain religious and occult symbolism means, to just training people how to be safer when they travel across the world. I took a lot of that experience, which was very difficult, and I'm still going through therapy after going through a lot of it. And I found my way to the U.S. at a very interesting time. While I was doing my immigration process, Donald Trump got elected for his first term, which made my legal immigration a bit more difficult because everybody decided to do it at the same time. So an elongated process. But I got to experience this. This immigration issue directly. Going through immigration in California and kind of seeing. The first thing I got met with when I received my permitted residency card was a bunch of invitations into how to get government money for free. So that was my introduction in California to immigration. While in my mind, I was like, I need to get to work. So I remember that. I remember the vilification that I started getting from certain groups and people out there when I spoke about my conservative views. You know, I moved to Texas, so you can kind of like see a little bit of. And before that, I was in Kentucky. People ask me like, well, why did you move those two places? Because they have constitutional carry, and I used to work in a very dangerous environment, and I know what that right provides me and my family. So like I got to experience what I experienced in Mexico and here. Somehow I ended up on Joe Rogan twice, without actually knowing what that was. He followed me on. I had a blog that I would write for online. It started off in Tumblr, and then it turned into a Facebook account, and then it turned into an Instagram account. I was getting live videos and pictures and just stories directly from some of the same people that I was working with or that I was seeing directly because I was still active back then. And a lot of this stuff would get shared on the news, and I would get messages from certain news institutions wanting to use a lot of the material that I was posting up. Apparently, there was a guy that had a show called Fear Factor. That's how I knew him. Who invited me on his podcast after he saw me on Instagram. And then my life changed. Something that was only known by, I was only followed and known by a few people in certain communities, specifically law enforcement and the military. All of a sudden, I'm this guy now. That put me into the limelight in a way that I was, I used to work in the dark. I used to wear a mask. So all of a sudden, I'm in front of all these people. There's two ways you can take that. One is, look at me, I guess. I took it as a personal mission to be a voice for a lot of voiceless people that are in Mexico still, and a lot of victims. We talked about this during breakfast. I raised over $4,000 for the Ryan Terry Foundation, if you know what that is. These federal agents that were killed in Mexico with some guns that were run down there. They thanked me for it, and they asked me, why are you helping us? So I can tell you the names of other people that were killed by those guns that you don't hear about.
Can you tell folks who specifically were sending the guns down to Mexico?
This was a a project that started under the end of the Bush administration, but when the Obama administration and Eric Holder took hold of it, they were basically allegedly they were basically tracking some of these straw firearms purchases in places like Arizona and trying to follow them down to Mexico to see who these guns were going to, which is not smart and not logical by any means. So I got to experience finding cartel members that were running around with civilian grade AR-15s and very old AK-47s and just guns that they managed to smuggle through, to then finding people shooting at us with 50 cals with optics on them, FN-57 pistols, like cop killer guns, which two 20-year-olds showed up at the house of one of my close friends and fellow colleagues that worked with me in the police institution that I was in, murdered him, his wife, and his daughter at 7 at that time lost her arm in that attack. And I'd never seen those guns before. And we start seeing them everywhere. I learned about Fast and the Furious watching CNN. And as somebody that had been working liaison with the United States at that time and growing up with an Americanized culture and kind of seeing the US as an aid or a friend or somebody who was helping us, it changed. A lot of the attitude in Mexico changed towards the United States during that time. And again, the whole aspect of like me being up here trying to change the viewpoints of Americans as far as what's going on down there, and also to be a voice for many people like myself who gave everything for their country. Like I gave a lot for my country. And all I got in return was vilification and a good swift kick in the rear end out. But again, the kind of the main part of my story and what I've been doing now has been a lot of therapy, which you guys are pretty great at, and a lot of advocacy, specifically speaking on some of the subject matters of cartels and their growing influence in the world. On my first Joe Rogan interview, which was almost 5 years ago, I spoke about the terrorist designation for the first time. Nobody had really talked about it in mainstream. And I kind of predicted that that's where we're going as far as this conflict. And here we are. I've been basically tracking and seeing the evolution of some of these threats down from Mexico and the ways that the U.S. has tried to combat them in the past. And I've been part of some of those efforts. And I always share the same observation. When I started, the best solution that the Mexican government could come up with to fight cartels was to put a bunch of militarized police officers in trucks and patrol cities waiting for things to happen. That was 2004. And now we're in 2025, and their best solution is military individuals in the back of pickup trucks patrolling cities. We've just lived through the most violent presidency in the history of Mexico under Andrés Manuel López Obrador, a leftist who decided to go the route of abrazos no balazos, hugs not bullets, as a counter cartel policy for 6 years. And now we're living with the results of that, which is violence at a level that I don't think I've ever seen, even when I was active. We're talking about IEDs now being prevalent in many of the conflict zones in Mexico. We're talking about armed drone technology that rivals anything you see in the Ukraine. We're talking about a body count that we will never be sure about because of the industrial level of body disposal now being displayed by some of these criminal institutions. And a federal government that denies everything. I was just in Jalisco about 2 months ago. I went to a place called Tala, which is at the center of New Generation Cartel territory. They've recently found a mass. They're claiming it was just a training site, but there's hundreds of shoes and clothing there. And there's a lot of pieces of bone being found in the property, being buried. They're claiming it was a training site. There's no logic why you would leave your shoes. Like, they're not getting new shoes by the cartels. So it's clearly an industrial level body disposal. So,
You know, when people were asking me why should we have Ed Calderon come speak it off the record, I told them this is a guy that knows 50 miles north and 50 miles south of the border better than just about anybody. And the thing that, talking to you all day long, who's in charge down there? Or like, who's wagging the dog here? Are the cartels working for the government, or does the government take their marching orders from cartels?
there are three power elements in Mexico, and one of them is it's the phantom menace. Like, nobody talks about them. Number one is criminal organizations. There are many in Mexico, some small. You know, we like to talk about cartels as a single cohesive institution. It's not. There's many of them. We're currently seeing the extinction of one of them, which is the Sinaloa cartel, which historically has been the traditional. That's what you see on Netflix. These guys that are all about the lifestyle, that try to keep a peace in the places where they operate, to keep the hearts and minds of the people around them to support them, and to basically be a shield against any sort of government intervention. We got to see the evolution of that, and then the Zetas, which are a hyper-violent militaristic institution of former army special forces guys that now turn into a cartel. And these guys are the ones that started doing the execution and terror videos that you started seeing online. I'm sure some of you have been sent some of these horrible videos in the past. That was an idea that these guys came up with. They started training the whole aspects of training camps and basically augmenting their capabilities by replicating themselves, very much like the Green Beret handbook, because that's who they were trained by. So we got to see an uptake in the violence.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
The Zeta cartel in their original form were the Air Mobile Group, the GAFES. Their School of the Americas trained, Fort Bragg trained ex-members of the military. That's who they got the main part of their training from. We started seeing cartels shooting randomly with an AK-47 when I started, to now having very, very good optics on their rifles and actually being pretty proficient in their shooting. Armored vehicles started being added into the mix. I mentioned these because they're a part of the same problem. These giant criminal organizations that basically become a government in the places where they are. That's one side of it. The other side of it is politics. We saw an evolution of some of these criminal organizations grow, and at some point in the past 20 years, they figured out a very clear thing. Mexico has been going through a process of democracy. Like, we had a long-standing political party that basically took 80 years in power, the PRI. That then turned into a conservative party taking power, which is the PAN. And then the very to the left party, Morena, taking power, which was viewed as an opportunity by some of these criminal elements to do what the mob did in the States, get politicized. They figured out that they can start paying for candidates. And once they were in power, they had impunity. So that's the second pillar of power in Mexico. And the final one, and the one that doesn't get talked about at all, is the army. The Mexican army, as an institution as a whole, has a hold over security operations in Mexico now. They were let out of the barracks during the kickoff of the drug war back in the early 2000s, and they have not wanted to go back into the barracks because they realized the amount of influence, power, and money that comes with being a policing arm for the federal government in Mexico. So I don't know if you noticed that Mexico went from using the Mexican Marines to arrest El Chapo to now not seeing the Mexican Marines at all operate in Mexico. It's because the Mexican army doesn't like anybody else but them operating in Mexico in that way. And also they saw that the United States was favoring the Mexican Marines. So they don't want that. So they switched that up again. So there's three power structures in Mexico that are controlling things. Now, who is the one that's really in control? I mean, nobody in the presidency of Mexico wants to have the military not on their behalf. But all politics in Mexico in one way, shape, or form is now cartel funded. And we have an overwhelming presence of a single party across the country right now, which is claiming to be the fourth transformation of Mexico, anti-corruption. We're different than the other parties. But 80% of that party is formed up by members of the other parties seeing that they're losing, and then now they're switching to this one. We just lived through the most violent political season in Mexican history. A lot of political assassinations. Why are they getting killed? Is it because they're trying to make legitimate change and they don't want to see that? Or is it because one cartel is sponsoring one candidate and the other cartel is sponsoring the other?
So now you have these pillars, the cartels, the politicians, and the army. But now we have this force that didn't exist the way it exists now, which is President Trump and what he wants to do. Even from 2016 to 2020, he was a very different man than he is today. So he's implementing tariffs, he's tightening up the border, and we're talking about what we need to do after we designate these cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. So how do the cartels, how does the political landscape evolve with this new tidal wave that's north of Mexico?
The first Trump administration, we heard all this. The threat of tariffs, the threat of the designation that didn't come. And I think that disappointed a lot of Mexicans. The media did its job with Trump in Mexico, a very good job. I mean, the amount.
You mean like they made the people hate President Trump?
Yes and no. Like I was humorously talking about the fact when the first migrant caravan came to Tijuana, I may or may not have made a bunch of Make Tijuana Great Again hats and handed them out because I just like causing a little bit of controversy. But it showcased the sentiment that a lot of citizenship has towards not only the United States, but the figure of Trump, which is America first. And the strength he's kind of showcasing to some people. So most of northern Mexico is very conservative. It's something that people just don't realize. But again, he made a perfect villain in the media. And again, we're going through a federal government that is very to the left, openly supporting Chavez and Maduro, and Cuba. So like he's a clear enemy. Again, that is the way they kind of implanted him in the minds of most Mexicans. But he's been the only one that has been in that presidency who has said things the way they are. The federal government is corrupted at a high level by the cartels. It is a true statement. He's not lying when he says that. And nobody before him has said that. So that has given a lot of people pause to like listen. For anybody that has lived through the level of violence in Mexico that like I have, the first day on the job, I had to cut somebody down from a bridge. That was my first day on the job. So when I hear this terrorist designation to see if it fits, I mean, I don't know what else does.
What else could it be?
A large organization of hyper-militarized individuals gaining control and governing a space and territory with a clear ideology. Some of them a very dark ideology. They're politicized, as we see with all these candidate killings. And a big moneymaker for them is human trafficking. It's probably one of their top ones. And the other one is the distribution of a certain narcotic that is responsible for the death of many people here in the United States.
With the tighter border, are the cartels even noticing that it's more difficult to get things across the border, or are they so good at it that they're getting product across anyway? Meaning, if I do drugs here in the US, is my supply dried up?
I'm going to be completely, this is something I sometimes have issues with because I know there's a lot of ideology and I get it. The border has been sold to us as a security measure for substances. That's just not the case. It has slowed down, if not stopped, a lot of the illegal immigration going across that border, which if you're pro open borders, you're basically pro giving the cartels a lot of money, because open border doesn't mean that you don't have to pay taxes to the cartels to cross that border. I think right now the current cost of going across that border, depending on where you're going to hit it, is somewhere in between $8,000 to $15,000 to cross that border.
So how does a person afford that?
I mean, this is a country that talks a lot about his history with slavery. We currently have slavery in this country that nobody talks about, because a lot of those people are basically working off the debt they have. So it's not that they can afford it now, but they will eventually, or their families that are already established in the United States will pay their ransom when they cross the border. So this is going on right now. Yes, the border wall and the upping security on the border wall has limited and stopped a lot of this immigration, which feeds human traffickers. Again, I've tracked some of these females going across Mexico that end up in hotels like Nevada being, used. But realistically, it hasn't stemmed the substance problem. And you can verify this anywhere you go. Just talk to your local drug enforcement agency people and ask them if the price of the substances have fluctuated in any way, shape, or form during this administration. The answer is no. Everything is still at a price.
I thought you were going to say talk to your local drug dealer.
If you know them too, it's funny you say that. California legalized weed, so a lot of the illegal drug market turned into legal, and a lot of the millionaires now used to be criminals. So it's complex. Drug prices haven't fluctuated or changed, and drug markets in Mexico are growing now exponentially. So it's not even the issue isn't even more that the trafficking drugs now. Some of them are just like growing their local drug markets and even achieving even more power and money. So it's getting worse.
Is the Mexican government wily or smart enough to use the cartels sort of like as an arm of its or a tool in its toolkit to fight back against the United States government when we're doing something they don't like? Basically, can they use them like some kind of intelligence service or things to do things the Mexican government can't?
They already are. If you want a proof of this, we just saw the arrest of El Mayo Zambada, the biggest cartel head ever in U.S. custody. I mean, there's nobody that rivals him. You can talk about Pablo Escobar. He doesn't even come close. The first visits he had while he was arrested were his sons and daughters that are born in the United States. How is that possible that he has a whole family up here? A lot of his lawyers that were petitioning his release because of the irregular nature of his arrest, he materialized in a plane and he was flown over the border from Culiacan to the United States, which the U.S. probably flew him there, right? You saw his lawyers basically petition the Mexican government to ask for his release, or else dire consequences for bilateral relationships was going to be affected. Basically, a geopolitical threat from a former head of the Sinaloa cartel. And the same lawyer that delivered this letter is now showing up in pictures with all of the heads of the Morena party for the past 5 years, being awarded and being given recognition. And there's a video of him in Congress. And also the past president went to the hometown of the Chapo Guzman 6 times during his presidency. We have a few Mexicans here. Bandiraguato is known for what industry? Drug dealing. That's where most of the drug dealers come from. That's a place where the former president went 6 times and was photographed talking to El Chapo's mom and lawyer. So the connection is, I don't know how they can deny the connection there. I mention all this because there's this vision that a lot of Americans have of sending drones down there or just sending the military and putting boots on the ground. which sounds like a great idea. You know, it's worked other places in the world, I guess. And I always caution people that talk about that. One wrong drone strike in the one wrong place. Mexico is a third world country, but it's very first world in a lot of its elements. You're going to make these people into Robin Hood immediately. If something, because again, these cartels are pillars of their community. They're one that built the churches. I had this surreal moment in Culiacan where I was going down this road that was pretty horrible, and then all of a sudden it was pretty, and they told me it's because it's next to the cartel house, so they made the road pretty there. So this is, these guys are embedded in their communities. So when you talk about the Mexican government trying to use cartels as a tool, I think they're both using each other. As far as elections, there were people with AK-47s standing outside of election boxes in Culiacan. Just making sure. And I have the receipts for everything I say. So if anybody wants those pictures, I could send them over. The level of corruption in the Mexican government is just high level. And the relationship they have with some of these criminal institutions is clear. You will hear people say like, no, Ed, you're wrong. Look at what they're doing in Culiacan right now, going after some of these criminal elements. Yeah, they're going after the witnesses. That's why you're not seeing any major operations against the New Generation cartel. You're not seeing any major operations going after the Northwestern cartel, which is basically a remnant of the Zetas, who are horrific cartel that rivals anything the Sinaloa cartel is doing right now. So why all of a sudden are they concentrating on the Sinaloa cartel?
I'll ask one more question, and then we'll take some questions from the audience. It's sort of like a academic question, but what would you rather see? Every single cartel be removed, or every single politician in Mexico be replaced with your handpicked group of people? What would make for a better outcome?
There needs to be a complete shift of military leadership and political leadership in Mexico. There is no moving forward with hand in hand with the Mexican military who are in command now. And if you want any sort of history of why I say that, look up something called the Guacamaya leaks, which is our version of WikiLeaks. Basically, a lot of military files came online, which clearly state that, hey, in this region of Mexico, we're supporting this cartel. In that region of Mexico, we're supporting that one. So let's not mess with these guys in this region in like a standing order. So how can you deal with that? How can you have them as allies, right? And then on the other end, you have the Mexican government, who's basically plugging their ears saying there's no problem, that went through 5 years, almost 6 years of hogs not bullets, and are now mocking the mothers of the missing, saying that this place they found in Jalisco isn't an extermination camp. It was just a training camp, and that they got new uniforms and new shoes there. They shouldn't be worried about it.
Do you know how crazy that is, that I asked you if you'd rather get rid of cartels or the existing political infrastructure, and you said the infrastructure of...
There's no way that these cartels can survive without that cover, because that's what they're doing. There's no way that these groups can survive if I know members of the military. They're not all corrupt. It's not an all corrupt institution. I used to work with some of the Mexican special forces guys, the good ones, the ones that didn't turn. And their main complaint was they were never allowed to just do their job. I was a part of a program, and we did our job for the good part of 6 years. And we took that Tijuana off the most dangerous cities list on the planet. And the only thing that was different there is that we had political backing. We had the financial industry and industry backing. And people were just tired of not being able to go out at night, or being afraid to get abducted. So that we had that backing, and things changed. I was just in the state of Saltillo. And if people want to find a clear success story in Mexico, like of what things could be if there was an actual political effort, Saltillo is it. Saltillo was a bastion for the Zeta cartel. Back in 2009, a group that was basically modeled after the same group that I was in, got implemented in the region. And I was just there, and I've never felt safer in any part of Mexico in my life. They went from having Zeta patrolling the cities and just being overtly there to now the only issue they had in the night where we were patrolling the city was a drunken bar fight outside of a space there, and it is a safe state. The only difference is that the political class has stayed consistent, and all of them had an agreement like, you know what, cartels are not worth it at all, so we're just going to stay on this path. There is hope. There are places out there that have success stories, and then there's politics. And a lot of the politics in Mexico right now that have led us to where we are openly Chavista to the left, pictures of Maduro on the walls, and a statue of Che Guevara in Mexico City unveiled. So that's who the U.S. is trying to figure out an alliance with, and I don't think it's there.
We'll take some questions.